Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a quick spin through the biggest stories in MMA. On today's episode, big win for Nurmagomedov this past weekend in Abu Dhabi. Settle down. It was Umar, not Khabib. Tony Ferguson was defeated by Michael Chiesa and decided to leave a glove in the octagon, huh? And who isn't excited for that huge women's flyweight title this fall, right? You know, come to think of it, Grasso versus Shevchenko 3 isn't too shabby either. Hello, everyone. Gorgeous George here on the con, and look at the distinguished panel we have for you today. Danny Segura, he's down in Miami. He always brings it. And check out Hablemos MMA. Goes from MMA Junkie Radio. He's here in Las Vegas, the fight capital of the world, and the MMA media titan. It's Mike Bond. He is in Toronto, also bringing the goods. Watch out. Cold coffee is going to be on the ones and twos, but before we get started, if you would kindly hit the like button, I would really appreciate it. In fact, why stop there? Smash the subscribe button, and you'll have access to our whole library of videos, including past SBCs. Guys, this past weekend, the UFC was in Abu Dhabi, and the fights were on ABC. Lots of eyeballs, right? Huge spotlight on that bantamweight division, my favorite division, 135 pounds. In the main event, it was Umar Nurmagomedov with Khabib in his corner, who defeated Corey Sandhagen pretty handily. What was your reaction? Mike, we'll go to you. Tell us, man, this main event, what'd you think the way it unfolded? Is that what you expected?
Yeah, I expected a high-level fight that would probably be a longer fight between these two. A lot of, exchanges on the feet and the ground. We kind of saw it all from these two high-level mixed martial arts over 25 minutes, and we saw Umar Nurmagomedov kind of live up to the hype, right? Everyone's been saying that he's maybe the best Nurmagomedov. We've been hearing this from years from people at AKA, Khabib's team, all sorts of things. And he went out there and got the huge step up that doesn't happen too often, but we've kind of seen a few times in this division now. Sean O'Malley got it against Piotr Jan. He broke through, and now Umar did the same with, fighting a guy who was significantly higher ranked here, but now he elevates to that top tier, this bantamweight division. And this weight class is, as we say so many times, man, like probably the best in the UFC, so deep. The fact a guy like Umar, who had no top 15 wins, can come in and beat the number 2 shows the depth of this division. So he's arrived. We might have the UFC's next undefeated champion on our hands, and Umar Nurmagomedov.
Mike, is he that good, or was Corey maybe off?
I think he's that good. I mean, I think Corey knew what he was getting himself into. They were supposed to do this fight originally last summer, and it didn't happen. So he went through a training camp, getting ready for Umar. Didn't happen, and then did this again. This fight was booked quite a while ago, too. So he did everything he needed to do. He went and linked up with Trevor Whitman. Maybe you could argue he kind of overthought the grappling a little bit, and maybe that limited other parts of his game in this fight, but that just shows the threat, right? Like, people talk about the Nurmagomedovs, as takedown guys and only going to hold you on the ground, things like that. Umar started as a striker, and he really had the grappling part of his side, like had to catch up to that first. So he is a multi-layered threat in every way, the modern mixed martial artist who can do it all. So he's really, really good. I couldn't be much higher. I have all the stock invested in Umar Nurmagomedov right now. All
right. Danny Segura, I'll let you enjoy that cup of joe. I'm enjoying mine as well in just a second once you start yapping. But what was your reaction, man? I was expecting more of a barn burner. What I guess Dana said Bilal and Edwards wasn't, right? But I mean, I don't know. It was fun. It's fun to see someone, I guess, really, really go out there and do their thing with Nurmi. But Corey just looked shook, dude.
I think it's just Umar is that good, man. I thought Corey was going to win the fight in the SBC we did prior to the event a week ago. I thought that Corey Sandhagen was going to win the fight, and I had him winning. But look, Umar completely surprised me. I mean, this is the first big significant step up that he takes in his career as far as caliber of opponent, and he performed amazing. I think Corey had a really good showing. I was actually surprised about how much of the wrestling of Umar he was able to shut down, but because he was so focused on shutting down the wrestling, which he did have success in, he didn't really let his hands go, which was sort of what we expected him to have the advantage. So I kind of expected this type of fight, a very technical fight, not very exciting in terms of a crazy war, but I was mesmerized just by seeing the technique. I just did think that Corey was gonna, maybe how he performed in round 1, he was gonna perform like that throughout the fight, and he was gonna get his hand raised. But props to Umar, man. I doubted him. I thought Corey was gonna get this done, and clearly he proved to everybody that he's a threat to the title.
Mm-hmm. All right, Goes. How about you, man? What were your thoughts on the fight? You know, since it's unfolded, and obviously you and I talked about it on Junkie Radio. We watched the fights, but the guys are bringing up some good points, man. Maybe we're focusing too much on Corey looked off versus this other guy's just a beast.
Yeah, I mean, Sandhagen's a tough out, right? Like, to see him get dominated in that fashion, you automatically want to try and find those types of avenues to make excuses. But we went through them all, and they're just not there, guys. They're not there. Nurmi just looked absolutely incredible. To see Sandhagen go back into the corner with his head down like that, and just them not really having too many answers for what's going on. I think at one point he said, "Look, I'm trying, guys." You don't see that really out of the top echelon of fighters. A lot of times it's not so one-sided like this. It was pretty amazing what Nurmagomedov was able to do, and boy, did he send a message to, you know, not just his opponent, but the rest of the division, to media, to everyone. This dude is for real, man. And that was like one, you know, sometimes when you're streaming with somebody in the same house and they're like a couple seconds ahead of you and you hear them scream and then you know something's going to happen. That's what it must have felt like being Corey Sandhagen that night. It just felt like this dude was a few seconds ahead of everything. Like, he just had no answers for him. And it's nothing against Corey Sandhagen. I don't think Corey Sandhagen took him lightly or anything like that. It's just this guy is that damn good, and I can't wait to see this guy fight again.
Yeah, that's true, man. That's one way to make your mark in a division. So you know, obviously in the division, you're right. Guys, so Davison Figueiredo, former flyweight champion, he came up and beat Marlon Vera, who just fought for the title. So he's now 3-0 as a bantamweight. And don't laugh at me, guys. Don't laugh at me. But who made the most compelling case for a title shot? Figgy, who's working his way up, held the belt before, or Nurmagomedov, who's got that shiny record and just dominated one of the top bantamweights in the world? Danny, how about you, man? What are your thoughts here? Is that a ridiculous question, or is there some points to be made here?
Not at all. I think if we're just judging it by the latest win, like, you know, Umar got a win in the main event against Corey Sandhagen, so at a higher spot on the card against a higher ranked opponent, compared to Figueiredo, who was on the main card, but obviously a few fights lower, and then against Chito Vera, who's obviously a former title challenger, top 5 guy, but you know, not Corey Sandhagen. But if you look at the totality of the last 3 fights, which is what we can only go by because that's the only amount of fights that Figueiredo has had in his UFC career, defeating Cody Garbrandt and Rob Font. Can you even remember the last 2 opponents of Umar Nurmagomedov before fighting Corey Sandhagen? No, I mean, they weren't even in the rankings, right? And Figueiredo fought a guy in the top 10 in Rob Font, and then a former champion in Cody Garbrandt, and he is 36 years of age. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he gets the title shot over Nurmagomedov, given that his time in the sport is a lot shorter. He is a little bit of a star. Fans love him. And look, if O'Malley were to defend his belt, Figueiredo-O'Malley fight would be absolutely stellar. I think as far as action-wise, it's a very sellable fight. So I'm going to put my money in Figueiredo here. I think he's got a really compelling case.
How about that? I thought you were going to laugh me out of this box here. How about you, Mike? You agree with that? Who made the most compelling case on Saturday?
I think it's Umar. I mean, Figueiredo definitely has a case here, and he's starting to do some really good work in this division. And if you told me I had to bet on anyone in the UFC right now to become the 10th fighter to get titles in 2 divisions in a single career, I think Deiveson Figueiredo would probably be the front runner among any of the other options right there. So he is close. He's doing well. But it's kind of hard to overlook Umar. I just think, like, I know the resume, Danny, great points there, but also have to take into consideration he doesn't have as many of those top wins because the guys weren't taking the fight with him. And that's ultimately why the matchmakers in the UFC decided to give him Corey Sandhagen and allow him to skip those steps, because he's been trying to fight top 15 bantamweights for the past few fights, and people haven't been putting up their hand to fight him. So I think that kind of shows where he stands. It's similar to like the O'Malley thing, where he's just going to be leapt up there. It might be a little bit of the privilege. You know, I'm sure the UFC would love nothing more than to have Nurmagomedov, who's undefeated, in a title fight or holding the title. And you do him versus Sean O'Malley. If he wins, that's a huge fight. People are already kind of talking about it. It's like the McGregor versus Habib light in a way. I don't think there's any of that personal tension between those two, but you put those names together and I think it would be a really big fight. And Sean O'Malley seems to acknowledge that as well, right? He said on his post-fight video blog that he thinks that would be a huge fight and almost wants to do it just so he could rub it in Conor's face that he could beat Nurmagomedov where Conor couldn't. So there's all sorts of storylines with a fight with Umar, and I think the only thing really standing in his way is if Merab Dvalishvili does win, God forbid it's like a close or controversial decision or anything like that. I'm sure the UFC would love to run that back right away if O'Malley lost the belt. So that's the thing that I think is the biggest obstacle in his way. But in terms of like, is there anyone in the top 5 more deserving or more worthy? I don't really think so. I think when the new rankings come out for the UFC, we'll probably see Umar at number 2 and Figueiredo will be probably like 3 or 4 or something like that. So he'll have the edge there. And I just think the UFC is going to pounce while the iron is hot. If you got Nurmagomedov on your hands so you can put in a title fight, you do it.
All right. Well, wow. I really thought you guys would be more about Nurmagomedov, and I was gonna try and play a trump card on you guys, but this is backfiring me. How about you guys? Is it unanimous? Do you feel the same way, or do you think there's Nurmi's the guy they'll go to?
Well, we've talked about this a few times. We talked about this on Junkie Radio, and Mike and Danny have both made me think a little bit. And so, Mike, one thing that you said about them, nothing more would they like to have than a Nurmagomedov up there in a title fight. And I kind of agree. I think this is a dude that deserves it. I think he is the strongest candidate. But what I believe they'd want nothing more is I think they enjoy having Sean O'Malley at the top. And sometimes I think the UFC, we really don't know what they're going to do, but sometimes when they become business oriented like that, I feel like they might feel Davidson Figueiredo, they might have a better chance of having Sean at the top longer in that matchup than they would with Nurmi, because I feel like Nurmi's going to, I think we're going to have spinning back click in 2 years from now. He's still going to be undefeated. I mean, that dude's a monster. So I don't know, man. I'm kind of on the fence. I think Nurmagomedov makes the most sense. I think that's the way they should go. But I wouldn't be as shocked if they did go the other way as I was the night of the fight. Night of the fight, I thought there's no way. But Danny makes a couple points, and I know George is chomping at the bit to make. He's got a trump card that he's going to lay on us. But I think I wouldn't be too shocked with that. But I think it's Nurmagomedov.
So let me run my theory, guys. I really thought everyone was going to say Nurmagomedov all day. But check this out. If you put the dots together, right? When Bilal won, it wasn't a barn burner, Dana White said. He's been training down with Habib and those guys, he also said. And then Ankalaev, who we'll get to in a second, he gets passed over. He's kind of that Dagestani wrestling style. Mokaev, 12-0, 13-0, whatever you are, 7-0 in the UFC. We don't need you guys in our fat flyweight division stacked with so many fighters. We could do without you. So I don't know, something about like that style, it doesn't seem too UFC friendly. And now we got another Nurmagomedov derailing, a guy who we thought was going to be a great matchup versus O'Malley. So I thought, man, that maybe this might be a way of just saying, you got to wait one more, that longer road to the title. I don't know. And I'm not a tinfoil hat guy, fellas, but that's why I thought Figueiredo might have a shot here. Whereas, most people would say, no, Nurmi. And I want to know what the chat says. You guys think it should be Nurmi or Figgy? But anyone want to chime in on my theory there?
I agree, man. I'm with you. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if they give it to Nurmagomedov. He's obviously deserving. He got a huge win, main event. Corey Sandhagen, that's probably the best win you can possibly pick up at this point in time. Not counting defeating the champion and the challenger that's coming up in Merab. But man, Figgy is 36. If you want to maximize his potential, it's now, right? Like Nurmagomedov is 28, as Go said. Like there's so much time. They can give him another fight. And he'll still be in his prime, or even just entering like the very best part of his prime. Figueiredo, if they want to use him, whatever's left of his star power, because remember, he is a former champion. He did have that legendary sort of fourth fight series with Brandon Moreno. He's looking good at 35. If you're going to use him, it's now. So I think that's something that they're considering as well.
Mm-hmm. And George, I mean, can we make the counter argument to a degree? It's not like, I know Figueiredo, first person to knock down Cheeto officially per the stats. That was a nice feather in his cap. But I don't think he's going to the grappling as well. And these fights at bantamweight now too, which I think he has to do to kind of overcome the size advantage. So if you're sitting here being like, who's the more exciting challenger. I don't think it's like, oh, Davidson Figueiredo 100 times over 100 over Umar Nurmagomedov. I think they both have, similar traits you could knock if you're going in that direction. And like I said earlier, Umar is primarily a striker. That his background. I don't think he would be afraid to stand with Sean O'Malley if they did a fight.
Mike, is he the brother of Usman Nurmagomedov from Bellator?
Yes, they're brothers.
Okay,
and
they strike. That guy, that Nurmagomedov loves to strike as well. They strike first and then they resort to grappling. Man, that's even more scary, I think. All right, some nice comments coming in. David Vining says nothing like an SBC on Monday morning. Let's go. Thank you, brother. Fist bump to you. Please hit the like button if you don't mind. Lazy Bed says Nurmagomedov shines in Abu Dhabi and the Pirate plunders another victory. Lazy Bed says, let's go SBC. Nash wishes Fada was on the show. I'll send her a text. Maybe we'll pun goes. Boris Daniels says UFC, Bellator, PFL, college football, and NFL football all this month. Let's go. Steve Williams says the best part of Mondays is right here. Hello from Malaysia, says Insider Queen. Hello, back to you in Malaysia. Josh Wallace says, I want to see Umar versus Figgy. I guess none of us thought of that one.
You're killing off a contender.
The other one's happening too soon. We're going to need someone, right? The other one's happening in a month, so we need someone to say, now you get the winner next, I think. Yeah. I suppose we could see it if one of the two, Mexican Marab or Sean O'Malley, breaks their hand while winning and knows they're going to be out for 8 months. Like John Jones. Remember John Jones got hurt last October. He's going to be out for 8 months. We don't need an interim title. I think 8 months was June. But whatever. All right. Goes, you're getting some shout outs. Fresh fade, always lazy bed says. So, all right. Yeah, Figgy versus Umar. I'm seeing more of that. Good stuff. Keep them coming, and I'll see if I can get to some more. We got some more stuff here, though. How about Tony Ferguson, submitted by Michael Chiesa? That's 8 straight. I think we all love Tony. We really do. I think we'd all love for Tony to leave the sport because he's older, and it's just not the Tony that we remember. And we know it's pretty much impossible to turn back the clock in this sport. I mean, dude, Chiesa was also a 55er, but he looks so much bigger than Tony Ferguson. What should the UFC do? It's kind of now in their hands. He threw one glove in the octagon, said he was taking the other one home, forgot about that, and threw it into the audience. What should he do, Goes? What should the UFC do? The ball's in their court.
Well, it's not, it's a topic that we've kind of hit a lot on the show, and I don't think anything's really changed because of the way Tony fought. I think it's not really about waiting for that bad moment to pull the plug. It's anticipating it, right? Preparing for that. We've seen this happen with other fighters. Why not be proactive here? It's just time, man. I can't think of any other scenario where you would want to keep Tony Ferguson around. I mean, there's the losing streak that just stands out. There's the possibility of something serious happening to this guy. He's had his run, man. He's done his stuff for the UFC, but I think it might be time to go. It's just, it's tough, man. It really is. If going into this one, I would have been able to stomach had he said something like, this for sure is going to be my last one and I'm going to enjoy every second of it. I think maybe he does deserve to go out that way, but I think we're far past that now. I think the UFC has to do what's right. And unfortunately, I think that's going to be saying goodbye to Tony Ferguson.
You agree, Danny?
100%. I don't think they should. I think it's a must at this point. The UFC has a responsibility with the sport, right? The UFC has promoted their company as the premier MMA organization on the planet. And clearly, Tony Ferguson is just not part of that anymore. I mean, 8 consecutive losses. He's fought all kinds of styles across 2 weight classes. Said, I cut out sparring. I brought back sparring. I went back with my other coach. I mean, we've already exhausted every single option. What is he going to say next at the next media day? Like, it's done. 8 consecutive wins in a row. You're putting him on main cards. Yes, I know he has a big name, but the UFC has a responsibility here to keep a certain level of MMA. And clearly, Tony just is not there anymore. Also, they have a responsibility with Tony as well. This guy just shouldn't be fighting. He is 40 years old, 8-fight losing streak. It's crazy to think that we're here. No more. That's it. It's over. It's done with. If he's going to go fight for another promotion, then so be it. But the UFC has a responsibility to either release him from his contract or, I don't know, maybe pursue him into retirement, but no more fights. This is it.
Unanimous, Mike?
Yeah, I think so. This reminds me too much of BJ Penn. It's like so sad, right? Danny laid it out well there. Like you come with a different time that maybe gives you like some hope that things will be different because he changed this or he changed that, and then it goes in there and it's almost like the performances are getting even worse and more lopsided and more definitive. I mean, when was the last time Tony Ferguson was finished in the first round? Right? It's been a while. I don't think it's happened at all during this losing streak. Yeah, it hasn't. I'm looking right here. He's never lost in the first round since 2009. So
Really?
that
Wow.
goes to show kind of here. So yeah, I mean it's getting worse. I understand the UFC tried to do right by him by giving him all these opportunities, but what's next at this point? I mean, who would he even fight in the UFC if they gave him another one? There's nothing I want to see at lightweight or welterweight. What you could like
Nick
dig
Diaz?
someone up that, yeah, what are you gonna say, like Nick Diaz or something like that? Like, no, I don't want to see that shit, man. It's not gonna be good. It's just gonna be another sad state of affairs. So if Tony wants to continue competing and wants to do some grappling matches or something, that could be fun, or whatever route he wants to go. But fighting at the highest level in the UFC, I think the time has just passed. He's had a great run. I mean,
This
where
should have
would
been
he
it, huh?
Hall of Fame discussion, all that type of stuff. There's all sorts of ways you could go, but yeah, I think it's hard to know what to take away because he just like flip-flopped on the whole thing so quickly. And when he got backstage, he was like, no, this is, I'm still going to keep going.
Wow.
From what I'm hearing, I mean, some people around him, this isn't reporting or anything like that. I think everyone's still kind of sorting through their emotions. I think behind the scenes, when the cameras are off and he's with the people around him, he knows that it's over and this was the end here. So we'll see if he sticks to that. We know how these fighters are, but I would be surprised at this point if we saw Tony Ferguson fight in the UFC again. What that means outside of the UFC or other options, who knows? I mean, no one ever truly retires, so I wouldn't be shocked if he shows up somewhere.
Mike, a few weeks ago, Arlovsky had his last fight for the UFC. Did he know that before the fight started? Do you know? Because they were so certain about it in the post-fight. And here's what I'm getting at. I almost wish the UFC would go, well, even if you're not going to retire, this will be your last fight. Enjoy it. Enjoy the walkout. Soak up the cheers, because he was getting a lot of love out in Abu Dhabi. Everyone was going nuts when the song played. I heard a lot of people flew to his last fight. It's almost like if you can tell him, after or beforehand, because what's he going to do? Be 1-7 and turn things around? I mean, I think the decision would have been made. Like, don't you think that they should have just told him before?
It's the worst possible thing that could happen too, because then it makes you feel like you can do it 3 times, 4 more times, and you almost get like a fresh start. So this is almost like the merciful way for it to happen. But when it comes to like your specific question, I don't really know, right? Like, is it the UFC's right to tell someone they can retire if they still owe them contracted fights? I mean, we're going to get into the whole antitrust situation later in the show. I don't know how that plays into that. If you owe someone these fights and you're signing them to the contract and they want to continue doing that work, I don't think they can force you to retire. This isn't, Chuck Liddell circa 2011 anymore. The game is kind of different now. And that's why you've seen more situations like this of people having losses and things dragged out.
I was bummed out when Andrei Arlovsky didn't at least get a chance to say goodbye if this is it. They just said, well, we're not bringing him back.
He seems to think he's going to continue fighting outside the UFC. I think he said he wants to do it another few more years. So I think the UFC doesn't want to look foolish, right? Do this whole video package and then have someone go backstage and be like, nah, I'm not done. Like, that's why
they did it for Michelle Watterson, and that's what tripped me out. Like,
well, she said she was done.
Bobby Lawler, but I think they knew internally. Yeah. Express something to the UFC. Maybe they had a video package ready. Maybe if they believe Tony, the whole one glove, situation, throws it out in the crowd. I mean, who was convinced for more than like 10 seconds there? Not me.
Guys, there was some other stars that night. Joel Alvarez, man, he looked really, really good. I love that lightweight division. That used to be the marquee division. Danny, what do you think, man, of Alvarez's performance? What might be next for him?
It was the best performance on the card. I know beating Corey Sanhagen, beating Chito Vera probably has more stock, since obviously, it has more meaning than beating somebody like Elvis Brenner. But as far as just the mechanics of the performance, I thought Joel Alvarez looked the best on the entire card. And it's so frustrating because I've seen so much potential in this fighter. I really do think he's one of the world's best, easily a top 15 fighter. But he's been fighting about once a year for the last 3 years. And we just haven't really been able to see much of him, right? And I think the inactivity plus that loss to Armin Sarukian, which is aging actually quite well, kind of damped the expectations on a lot of people in this fighter. But I think they got reignited on Saturday. This guy is a threat. I agree. Put him on that October 26th card back in Abu Dhabi, so he doesn't have any visa issues. And also Ilia Topuria's headlining, so Spain is going to have its eye on that card. He called out Bobby Green. I don't hate it. He was just in the rankings, so it's not a bad fight, but he is coming off a loss. But yeah, against anybody, October 26th return, that's what makes the most sense. Joel Alvarez, hopefully, fingers crossed here, he keeps active and we see him in the top 15 pretty soon.
What about Mackenzie Dern? She needed a win, and she got it. And I think she shored up a few deficiencies. Your thoughts?
Well, we just finished talking about Tony Ferguson, right? And when he would have a loss, he would kind of point at other people, point at coaches, training camps. There was always something. I love what Mackenzie Dern did. She kind of pointed at herself. She said all the right things in the lead up, and she did address those deficiencies in her game. I love that. She was able to fight a different fight against Lupi Godinez. It's no slouch. That's a very, very tough fight. And I think a lot of people had Lupi possibly winning that fight. So I think she stuck to what she said. She didn't brawl. She went out there skill for skill, and it worked out for her. And I hope that she can kind of gain momentum with this and keep fighting that way. I think she'll be way more positive and get more wins fighting that style than just going out there and brawl. That just doesn't last very long.
Straighter punches and some offensive wrestling. I like that.
Yeah.
She linked back with Jason Perillo, who's won titles before with other fighters. So I think that was a good decision. And yeah, you're right. She kind of swallowed her pride and decided to look into the mirror, instead of pointing the finger. Mike, how about that Shah Magomedov? I liken him almost to, like, we'll say the Middle East Paddy Pimblett. You know what I'm saying? Like that type of success and love that he's getting. And I don't know if the UFC is going to like baby him a little bit or unleash him, but he's got some great kicks and looks like a lot of people love watching this guy compete.
Yeah, he's fun to watch. I'm not really sure where his ceiling is. We need to see him fight, a grappler whose plan A is to try to get him to the ground. I mean, he's being taken down by guys like Bruno Silva, who are not known for their wrestling or grappling by any stretch. So you just feel like it's maybe a matter of time. But if you want to matchmake him carefully and give these type of fights, twice a year in the Middle East and wherever they want to go on that region of the world, which is seemingly the main place where he's able to fight now. I don't know which commission is sanctioning him stateside with, the one eye situation. But yeah, I mean, he's a fun guy. Middleweight needs all the exciting, interesting fighters it can possibly get, because the well is pretty dry in terms of like turnover at the top there. So I hope you can make a run and do things interesting. I mean, I see Steve Williams in the comment here saying Shara Bullet versus Bo Nickel. If you're Shara's team, absolutely turn your phone off if they're calling with that one. I don't know if I'd do that right now, but yeah, there's fights out there that you can do, and I'm sure we'll see him back in October fighting someone on that UFC 308 card.
Go to the Caucasus Mountains where they might not have any 5G or whatever. And you're right. Don't answer that call. That's a horrible matchup for him. I was looking at the chat. We don't have time. I got to move on to the next topic. But a lot of people are still saying, let him write out some more fights, talking about Tony. You guys are crazy. Some of them are even saying, what about the irony if he were to go to BKFC and work for McNuggets again? Some good stuff in the chat. And I'll try and catch up a little bit, guys. Comments, questions, bring them and I will get to them, but I got to move on. Let's talk a little bit about PFL. They had their first set of playoffs with the women's flyweight. They no longer have lightweight or featherweight. Now it's flyweight, 125 pounds. And they also had the men's heavyweight. So real quick, Goldsoff and Popov, they advanced. Good luck to them. All right, but let's focus on the flyweights. Dakota Ditcheva and Tyler Santos, they move on. That's that flyweight fight. Title fight in the fall that I teased at the beginning. I'm so clever, aren't I? Some people surprisingly were telling me online they're looking more forward to that than Grasso versus Shevchenko. That's how impressed they were, I guess. Maybe Ditcha was carrying a lot of that load, but Goes, what were your thoughts on the night of fights and I guess zeroing in on this topic right here of the flyweights?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the big story, right? I think that's why a lot of people tuned in. It was a fun fight. Dakota got put on her butt for a moment there. It got pretty interesting, but she was able to figure out a way. That's kind of what I like about her. She can make adjustments, but you cannot let her get, if she gets you in that plum, holy crap, it's just like a Terminator. She knows where to throw that knee. She's done it over and over. She can be very destructive. So it does make things interesting. The Santos fight I thought was a little bit closer than maybe some people had it. I actually scored it for Carmouche, but I think either way, whenever you have Dakota Ditcheva, despite what she did in this fight, I still feel like people will probably still doubt her. I think it's probably going to have to take the Santos fight for everyone to be all in on this girl, but she definitely is helping carry that torch, right, that Kayla Harrison left behind.
Dude, I thought her nose was going to look like Rich Franklin when he fought Anderson Silva the first time. That knee was right up the middle. Danny Segura, man, your thoughts on PFL playoffs? Sorry, were you as excited about 125? I'll tip my hat to PFL. They kind of made that, at least that foursome, exciting.
Yeah, no, and I would say this is probably like the best possible result for them, right? Like Tayla Santos, maybe the biggest name, and then you got Dakota Ditcheva, who is, their best prospect right now and could turn into one of their biggest names. And certainly she's been drawing a lot of attention. So I think this final is something that they probably looked on paper and they said, ideally, this is something that we want. And they got it. So I think this is a fantastic final. I'm really looking forward to it. I think this is one of the more exciting finals that we'll see. Obviously, we are still waiting for some other results so we can get the full lineup. But man, I'm excited for this one. I got Santos. I said at the beginning of Spinning Back Clique, we had a question about who's gonna win the entire season. I'm still riding with Santos, but after that performance and Dakota looking good in every fight, I'm a little scared about my pick, but I'm still gonna ride with Santos here. I think she wins the whole thing.
Dixon Sider agrees. He says Dakota's gonna smoke Santos. Quay Stefan, hello. George in the panel, hello to you, Quay Stefan. Josh Wallace says Dakota versus Tyler. Winner goes to the UFC, LOL, or back to the UFC, I guess, in the case of Tyler. Mike, your thoughts on PFL playoffs? You think they made a splash? And have they made a splash in 2024 after acquiring Bellator? Maybe give us a little recap there.
No, it's been underwhelming to say the least. I mean, Dakota Ditcheva has been a godsend for PFL. Without her this season, man, it's not that interesting, just to be honest. I know the people over there aren't going to love hearing that, but it's just the reality. I mean, you look through the next upcoming playoff events for these next few weeks throughout the month here, and it's just like, it's nothing that I feel like is appointment viewing, but I think Dakota Ditcheva is proving herself to be someone you go out of your way to watch. We'll find out how good she really is with this fight against Santos. I mean, you look through the competition she's fought so far, it's not an insanely overwhelming record. I think, the opponents are combined like 50 and 45, like something around those records. She hasn't fought someone who's anywhere near the level of Tayla Santos. So we'll find out if she's the real deal there, but she wins that fight, and PFL is going to have to do everything in its power to keep her around, to not have another Kayla Harrison situation. I think they'll obviously take, all the steps they need to. Dakota's pretty young. She wins, it's going to lock her into another contract for another season, and they'll build around her. So they have something with her here, especially if she wins, and they got to be pretty pleased about that. But yeah, I'm not ready to anoint her, the next queen or anything like that, but she's looking pretty damn good. She's smoking these opponents, and the Tayla Santos fight is a legitimate top fight that PFL can promote and all that stuff. I don't know if I'm more excited for it than Grasso and Shevchenko. I mean, that is obviously a different tier and a different level of historical significance, being the first ever female trilogy in the UFC. But for what PFL is, this is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
George, red card for you for suggesting that earlier.
Really? Yeah. Well, I said the internet was saying that, and I was just relaying what the internet was saying, but I didn't think they were crazy, guys. But guess what? We might revisit that if Ditcheva smokes them, and one day she faces Grasso or Shevchenko. I don't know if Shevchenko's getting older. I don't know if it'll be possible, but I think she's the real deal.
Grasso Ditcheva would be very exciting.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, but it was nice to see her finally get hit, taken down, and seeing her, going through her mechanics of getting up and things like that, and facing a little bit of adversity. And, Mike, I was thinking as you were talking, Renan Fajeda, man, that guy kind of became a star for him, but this thing's on hold, right, for Francis. And then Francis, the big signing, he's on hold. And Jake Paul, will he ever arrive? And they never brought back the boxer. What's her name again, guys? Clarice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Clarissa Shields. Like there's so much pop that they could have. And I don't know. I guess we just need to get through this season. And then next year, if all the roster merges, Maybe we can have a little bit of fun. Johnny Eblin, Patchy Mix.
Yeah.
Come on, man.
The Pitbull brothers.
This is Popov winner fighting the winner of Ngannou and Ferreira. I mean, is that what we're getting here?
Maybe. And Ngannou's pushing 2.5 years of not fighting. So
He played them, dude.
Huh?
I don't think he's gonna fight for them. I think PFL played in that one, man.
Oh wow!
All right.
They're working on it for October 19th, but we'll see what happens.
Is that for Hannon versus
Ngannou, Saudi Arabia?
Is that the same night as the playoffs, or is that a separate event?
No, I think I don't know if that would be their championship event. They did it on it was Thanksgiving week last year where they did their championship round. So I don't know. I think that would be their pay-per-view in Saudi Arabia. I'm not sure though. Ngannou mentioned that when he was on the road.
Their finals usually in November. So
yeah.
All right, so give me the quick predictions. I forgot. It got lost in the shuffle. Goes Ditcheva and Santos.
I'm gonna go Ditcheva. It just seems like it's destiny this year.
Danny Segura said Santos. I think I remember that one. Right?
Yes, sir.
Mike, you're the tiebreaker.
I'll say Ditcheva just for the hope of PFL's promotional health.
Damn. All right. All right. So let's continue on, man. Like, look, Goldsloff and Popov did look solid, beating Vassell and Johnson. But God, the pacing, PFL makes it so painful, man.
It
10 minutes between the end of the fight and then telling us who won, and then they didn't do any bringing in Dan Hardy to talk to the winners, probably because of the pacing, and they don't speak English, and that's the part that's just a little bit painful. And these are playoffs. We're supposed to be excited for playoffs, semifinals on the same night, and they nailed it with flyweight. Yeah, exactly. They nailed it with flyweight, but heavyweight was a little more painful. How about this lawsuit? UFC, right? They got sued by a bunch of fighters over the course of a few years, and anyway, they got condensed into 2 cases. So this past week, and if you hear Johnson versus Zuffa, it's Kajan Johnson, and if you hear Lee versus Zuffa, it's Kung Lee. All right. So this past week, a Nevada judge rejected a $335 million settlement proposal for 2 antitrust lawsuits brought against the UFC by a group of former fighters, and that is the Johnson versus Zuffa case and the Lee versus Zuffa case. Judge Richard Bulwer also set a tentative trial date of October 28th for the Lee versus Zuffa case. So this past March, guys, this thing had basically been wrapped up. Remember, the lawsuits was going to be $894 million to $1.6 billion, but they settled on $335 million M's. And the fighters, they were like, well, that was 10 years ago. They weren't too happy, but I think everyone was glad to move on. But they're not moving on. The judge kind of looked at this and said, no. This doesn't work. Here's a statement from the UFC as to what their reaction to what the Nevada judge did. They said, quote, we obviously disagree with this ruling and believe it disregards the expertise of counsel from both sides, as well as that of an accomplished and expert mediator, all of whom have decades of experience in antitrust case law. It prevents the athletes from receiving what they argued is their best interest and unwinds an extensively negotiated settlement that, in the plaintiff's counsel's own words, another quote, would far surpass the typical antitrust class action settlement. And then the quote continues, and is an excellent result for the settlement classes by all traditional measures. Additionally, by taking the unusual step of denying the settlement at this preliminary approval stage, the judge is also denying the athletes their right to be heard at this pivotal moment in the case. As we have said throughout the process, we believe strongly in the merits of our cases and are evaluating all our options, including without limitation an appeal, and have initiated discussions with plaintiffs' counsel who have expressed a willingness to engage in separate settlement discussions for the Lee and Johnson cases. Mike, were you surprised when you heard this? Did you think it was a wrap when they settled earlier this year?
For the most part, yeah. I mean, I'm obviously not super familiar with antitrust law, but when something like this comes together, I mean, I guess you've watched enough like crime television. When 2 sides come to a settlement and agree to it, you usually feel like that's what's going to go forward, right? You don't usually see it being denied. So yeah, this did feel like somewhat of a wrap. Obviously, it did have to be approved. They had to figure out the details of, distribution of payments and things like that. So Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a very significant and interesting development. If we do go to trial, it's like we talked about many times, right? The fighters could get 5 times that 335 million, or they could get, like you said, 0. So that's definitely a little frightening if you're on that end. I don't know where I stand on whether this will go back to a settlement. It seems like both sides are certainly open to that type of discussion, but it's going to need to be something that is clearly on a different tier than what they came together this time around. And I don't know exactly what that means. So yeah, this whole thing is pretty interesting. I mean, Dana's comments about going to high school with the judge was also interesting and obviously timed intentionally, right? Like he did that interview with Kevin Iole, and that all comes out in the first 3 minutes or so. So he was clearly wanting and intending on sharing that message to muddy the waters a little bit. And I'll share, for everyone saying he needs to recuse himself and it's a conflict of interest. I mean, I only know so much. Again, Mike Russell, who's kind of a longtime MMA journalist, put this out yesterday, so credit to him for his reporting. But he said Richard Boulware did attend Richard Boulware did attend Bishop Gordon High School in Las Vegas the same time as Lorenzo and Dana from 1986 to 1987, but they ran in different circles. He was a year ahead of them, and he was the student governor and co-valedictorian of his class. So I don't necessarily think he was running in the same circles as Dana, who, as Mike Russell also reported, he only went there for 2 years, and he went back to Maine to finish his senior year of high school. So I don't really know how much overlap there is, but if you can put that kind of thing out there and put doubt in any jury member's head or anyone's head, I mean, I don't know what that'll lead to, but to me, that came across as very intentional and tactical, and who knows what type of dirty games are going to be played going forward here. But this definitely felt like an intentional thing to try to stir the conversation like we're having right now and put it on this and the judge rather than the merits of the case.
All right, Goes, what were your thoughts on Dana even throwing that out there? Like Mike said, do you think he's just trying to muddy the waters a little bit? Or because I mean, as easy as he kind of can't remember if he maybe bullied him and Lorenzo bullied him, or what circles they ran, can't the judge say the same thing? I don't remember you either.
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot goes into this stuff, and I don't think it really holds very much. I was really surprised in the first place that they settled, but when you really read into things and what was to come, it's a little understandable. I think they just go back to the tables and they'll probably come up with a better settlement, knowing what went down the first time. But you have to remember, like, all these depositions and stuff, they have timestamps on them. Like, they can only last so long. And I think they were getting to the point where they would have to redo all that stuff. And there's so many fighters that are just waiting to get paid. I would be shocked if this went to another trial. I think they just settle again, but for a larger amount.
Danny, what do you think happens? Trial or settlement?
It's so tough. I do think if it doesn't go to trial and there's some type of settlement, I think the judge also wants to see something more than monetary wise, compensation for the fighters. He had an issue with the settlement because it was just straight up like, here you go, there's money and we're good now. But like, he's saying that basically there's a case here for, antitrust issues. So, it's going to get very interesting. I don't think the UFC obviously wants it to go to trial because in the first place, they wouldn't have tried to settle it if they thought they would have had a very compelling case to, save themselves any money whatsoever in terms of, winning the trial. But I do think the judge wants to see more from the UFC, and maybe there's going to be some sort of compromise. We'll see how much the UFC is willing to do as far as like changing some of their contracts and some of the way things are being done today in the MMA industry. But I think that's what the judge ultimately wants. And look, luckily we have a almost identical twin in the sport of boxing, combat sport, using the hands. Obviously, there's some other aspects left out, but we've seen issues with them in the past as far as contractual stuff, and then we've seen certain laws be put into place so that no one holds all the power, and clearly that's what's happening here in mixed martial arts. So we'll see. I do remain hopeful that this not only gets the fighters maybe a little bit more money, but I hope there's some changes as well in the industry so that the powers between the promoter and the fighter are a little bit more balanced than they are now.
I'm glad you brought up that part. It's not just the money. It's the Sherman Act, I believe, is what's at play here. A federal law over 100 years old, and it has to do with monopolistic practices, they say, like monopolies, and limiting the competition and making it oppressive, I guess, for fighters to not just have the one option. So that is one thing that I think the judge wanted to, I guess, be a little bit more clear about. And I think what happened, guys, is the UFC has leapfrogged so much in their revenue that I think he said, whoa, because they're up to 14 billion, I think, when you look at some of the latest lists of what they're worth. And I think he just said, hold on a second. I think there's been more money here at play than what we were settling on. I think they were kind of like working off older numbers. I think that's what he's thinking. But like we've all stated, no one's an attorney here. That's just kind of my field. Every few months something comes up, you read more about the case and you read more about different cases similar to that. But I think they will settle, and hopefully the fighters do have, I guess, more rights going forward. All right, good stuff, guys. Let's move on to some other exciting stuff that happened this past week. We got some fight announcements, right? UFC 308 is sick. UFC ain't playing around on October 26th in Abu Dhabi. Kind of reminds me of the old days where they would not announce a card 2 to 3 months in advance. We would look forward to the card, and then we'd enjoy the fuck out of that card. Invite people over, pizza, beer, that whole thing, man. I really, really loved that announcement they made. But before we unpack this crazy lineup of fights, word to the UFC, you might want to look at UFC 307, all right? Because UFC 308 is money. But yeah, 307 still needs a little bit of help. Here's what 308 looks like, guys. Ilia Topuria will defend his UFC featherweight title against Max Holloway. I don't know if the BMF fight's on the line or not. Maybe the guys will tell me. Robert Whittaker versus Hamzat Chimaev. Magomed Ankalaev against Alexander Rakic. And then we have, RDA versus Jeff Neal. This the whole other list of matches. Ige versus Nerone Murphy. It is insane. I know I'm leaving another big one now, but guys, what was your reaction to these fights? Topuria, we know that probably wasn't the first option. It probably was Makhachev, but I think there was an injury there with the hand. Mike Bond, your thoughts on this card?
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, Ilia Topuria and Max Holloway, probably now my most anticipated fight of the year. Dricus and Adesanya coming up at 305 is a big one too. But this one, I mean, how could you not want to see this after what Max Holloway did in the last fight, after what Ilia did in the last fight? We've been waiting for this fight, so I'm absolutely excited. See if Max Holloway can reclaim that belt, which, over 4 years after he lost it, people thought probably wasn't going to happen for him. And then this goes to show how quickly things can change in the sport, right? Like, he was locked out when Volk was the champ, and now he's got the chance to win that back. And I think in a matchup that is pretty good for him as well. Obviously, Ilia Topuria is ridiculously confident right now, and it's going to be really interesting to see how this one plays out. I could not be more excited. And I think the other one that you were forgetting, George, was Cyril Gahn and Volkov.
Oh, yeah. Danny, did they make a mistake by not going back to Volkanovski and getting an instant rematch? He defended 5 times, just like Israel Adesanya and Kamaru Usman, yet they got instant rematches. This guy didn't. And I know he had 2 vicious KOs back to back, but the last one was in February, and we said, hey, rest, maybe at the end of the year. Well, this kind of is the end of the year.
Yeah.
But I agree. Holloway's a hot hand, pointing down that BMF title. I get it. So how about you, man? What did you think of this announcement?
I think if they would have gone with the Volkanovski immediate rematch, I wouldn't have hated it. I think Volk certainly is deserving at 145, but like his 2 losses at 155 still hurt him. And look, he got a pass, right, to go for 2 titles twice, and he failed. And then he got viciously knocked out by Ilia Topuria. So that kind of, I feel like, eliminates a little bit that immediate rematch, especially when you got other contenders, right? Like, not that I'm dying to watch Evloev fight Topuria, but certainly a deserving guy. Brian Ortega's back, Diego Lopez doing his thing, Max Holloway the most deserving, the most interesting right now with the whole pointing down UFC 300. Look, I don't hate that Volk got skipped over, and look, it's good that Volk is probably taking an extended break. Keep it that way. Have him take the winner of this fight. That'd be fine with me. But no, this was the fight. If we're talking about like the biggest possible fight, the most exciting possible you can make right now with Ilia Topuria and with Max Holloway, it's this right here. I'm super hyped and I can't wait to watch it.
Joseph Boza said Volk needs a break. Chris Goes Wild says, nah, Volkanovski needs a break. Brian John says, let Volk rest some more. All right, shit. I'll back off on that one. Goes Ankalaev against Rakic. Who does that leave for Alex Fajeda? I don't know, because I thought it should have been Ankalaev versus Alex Fajeda, but he's fighting Alexander Rakic.
Yeah, this one kind of baffled me a little bit because I don't know what you do now at that point. Like, what is it that you're going to do with Alex? Is he going to sit around? I mean, he doesn't seem like the type of guy that would ask for time off. We've never really seen that in his forte. So for Ankalaev, like, I just don't understand when you sit down, you talk to the UFC, you show them what you've been able to do. What do they tell you that you haven't done yet? To me, he was the right guy to make that fight. But yeah, it's a little head scratching there.
Could it be what I was mentioning earlier?
Man, you got that tinfoil hat on, huh?
Mokaev. You know what I'm saying?
That draw against Jan Blachowicz definitely didn't help him, and he's still living some of the consequences of that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point, Danny, but let me push back with this. Then who? And I know this is more about 308, but I want to talk about this. Then who for Fajeda? Because Blachowicz is coming off a loss to Hill, I think, or right? And then the draw. As much as I love that Polish dude, you know, and he's fun, you know, I get it, former champ, but maybe Fajeda is going to take some time off, and I don't want to put that tinfoil hat on. I'm not a tinfoil hat guy on again, but geez, I hope Alex isn't going to heavyweight. But just, you know, like that's how baffling this announcement was to me. Nikita Krylov, he's won 3 in a row. I mean, is that a stretch?
Yeah, no, I
got a
think
shot.
I think it had to be in Clive, but it does make me wonder. Maybe they I don't know. I don't know. Again, I don't want to be all conspiracy theorist, but maybe they're waiting for something to happen. They just want to keep Pereira on standby because the heavyweight division is very volatile right now. Who the hell knows if Stipe Miocic is going to make it to that John Jones fight and vice versa, right? If you need all of a sudden a heavyweight fight, you can do Aspinall on Pereira, and I think a lot of people will be hyped to buy that pay-per-view if they decide to cancel Stipe Miocic and John Jones once again, because it seems that John Jones is just set on fighting Miocic no matter what. And again, if Miocic doesn't make it, John Jones versus Pereira, I'm so sorry, Aspinall, like that'd be an amazing fight as well. Dying to see it. He deserves it 1,000,000% over Alex Pereira, but you put John Jones and Alex Pereira together, dude, people are going to be just take my money on that pay-per-view. So maybe they just want to have him on standby to see how things play out from here to November.
Yeah. I think there's a wild card there too, with depending what happens with Israel Adesanya against Duplessis in a few weeks. That's something that could be in play too.
Explain. What do you mean? He could go up.
Win. You do the fight with Pereira again.
Oh, light heavyweight. Oh, he has been bulking up too. Didn't they say that? He's been bulking up.
Apparently, yeah. So who knows? That's always something they could pull out of the back pocket, but it definitely is a weird choice, especially with Pereira saying that he wants to fight in December, but maybe it is a little bit of a longer break because it seems like things are shaping up. Who knows if Connor's going to fight, but I think the hope is that him and Chandler fight in December, and they're not going to put Pereira on the same card as Connor. He's going to be alone. There won't be any title fights, I don't think. So
here's one thing I can guarantee you guys. If John Jones walked into a closet against Aspinall, Fajeda, and Izzy, John Jones is walking out. Just so you guys know that. Toughest human ever.
I'm not there with that. Move on.
Hamzat and Whitaker. Do we care anymore? Just because Hamzat just kind of disappoints us so much. I mean, it is a nice matchup. It's kind of they're trying to run this thing, right?
He needs to go up for this one. If he doesn't, we got a serious problem here.
Yeah. I love the matchup. We hope it happens. How about Harrison versus Vieira? Speaking of UFC 307, that's the one in Salt Lake City earlier in October. That one's a nice matchup for Harrison. So we pretty much know now it will be Raquel Pennington versus Juliana Pena. I guess they haven't officially announced that, but Vieira has been at the top, near the top of 135 pounds. Do you guys like this fight booking for Kayla Harrison goes? Is it the right step, or would you have already promoted her to a title shot?
The thing, Kayla just has that it factor. I think people are going to tune in no matter what. She looked fantastic in that last fight, and I get it. It's an aging Holly Holm, but she dominated her. And, if Kayla continues to keep getting better and with her timing, I think this move to the UFC, we're all going to look back and say, look, this was the right time. She's making the proper improvements to get up at that top echelon. I actually think one more fight like this will do her well. and I think it'll work out for her in the end.
Mm-hmm. Jose Aldo, he wasn't kidding around. I guess he has re-signed and he's back with the UFC. He's fighting Mario Batista. You like this one, Danny?
No, not really.
Really?
Look, I like Mario Bautista as a prospect. I think the dude definitely deserves a big fight, but not Jose Aldo. I think the way Jose Aldo looked against Martinez, I think you should do sort of like a Legends tour, right? Like just have him say goodbye to the sport in a good way. Have him in some exciting fights against some older known names, and just have some fun fights with him. It just seems kind of yet again like they're throwing him to the wolves to hope to build another contender off his name, and I don't like to see that, especially with Jose Aldo. Right? There's some fighters that you get why the UFC is doing it, but this guy's one of the all-time greats. This guy's special. I wish the UFC would kind of do him right and have better matchups. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, for his first fight back, they try to make the Dominic Cruz one, but for whatever reason, I think timing wise, it didn't work out. Now that you got all the time in the world, like why wouldn't you make that fight, right? It seems that Dom was in. He just didn't want to rush and fight in Brazil at that time. So that's the type of fights I want to see him in. Put him against the Garbrandt, put him against sure, yeah, put him against Cejudo, put him against as I just mentioned, Dominic Cruz. I mean, there are so many fun fights for him. More than Mario Batista. And I love Mario Batista. Again, all props to him and what he's doing. But I don't know. This fight just doesn't make much sense to me.
I was excited about the matchup until you poo-pooed on it, but I actually agree with you, Danny. I think you're right. They have enough legends in that division where they maybe could have done something in that regard. All right, Mike Bond, your thoughts on these matchups at 307, and maybe you would know, is the main event going to be Pena and Pennington, and if it is, it needs more backup, that card, right? When we pair it next to 308, 307's lacking, brother.
Yeah, I'm not trying to ruin anyone's Monday, but that seems like it's probably going to be the main event of 307. It was going to be Max and Ilya before Islam's injury came up, and they kind of had to reshuffle the deck there. So, I mean, I don't feel too bad for Salt Lake City. They've got some pretty banger cards over the past couple of years. They're going to try to do everything they can, but this unfortunately just seems like that one on the schedule where you're going to get, the weird, not so amazing title fight main event, kind of like what we got in January with Pantoja and Usyk. Last summer, we had, Amanda Nunes and Irina Aldana. So sometimes this is just the way the UFC schedule breaks. It's unfortunate, I guess, for the people being asked to charge $80 or spend those insane ticket prices to go to a live event now, but is what it is in that regard. These matchups are fine. I think Kayla Harrison, this is the appropriate step. Give her one more before the title shot. See if she can make weight again. I think she admitted to us at the Hall of Fame red carpet she got up to like 170 in between these fights because she had the hand injury. So maybe make sure she can hit 136, 135 again, coming off something like that. Although kind of agree with the guys here, not excited. It just feels like what we just saw with Jonathan Martinez, right? Like it's basically the same fight, the streaking guy who's not a big talker, doesn't really have that signature win. And can he fend him off, or can he do that? Although I guess, showing true to his legend status, though, he doesn't turn down fights. He'll take on anyone. I'm sure they're paying him, a pretty penny to come back and do a new contract. And I'm sure the deal with that is you got to fight whoever we want you to. So this is who they chose. I would have liked to see something different, but maybe if he wins this one, that's where we go after this. But bantamweight is insane. And I don't know, with a guy like Umar Figueiredo, seeing all these, I don't know if I like all those chances of getting to the title. So you kind of wonder where you got to matchmake him. Go ahead, Danny.
I'll go to you in a second. Let me just say this real quick. Scott Christian says, I don't mind Pena and Pennington. It seems like it should be good. And yeah, Pena is going to bring the trash talk, but is it worth 80? Probably not. And then one other one, Ronald E. Smith says 307 is going to get ripped by the haters, or Ronald E. Smith, you could just say by fans, man, fans and media who are looking at the card fairly. It doesn't make us a hater. It's just not a solid card just yet. And Danny, this is why I wanted to go back to you, because Dixon, I know he wants me to say something else. He says, Danny, do you really not get why? It's a business, bro. Get all your money's worth out of Aldo. He already had his goodbye in Brazil and Martinez. I don't know if you were going to address that one, but maybe address that one and whatever else you were going to say.
I disagree. I mean, The UFC sells the 3 letters UFC. I don't think they're trying to build Mario Batista so he could be the next pay-per-view king, and that's what they're gonna base their business on. Like, no, dude. Like, I think this is very different. I think if it were boxing, okay, maybe these type of suggestions work, but this is the UFC product, right? I would say this is a freebie for the matchmakers. Jose Aldo versus Kaya Sakura. Make him debut against them. That'd be fun as shit. And look, again, putting my tinfoil hat on, I just thought about this. Mario Batista trains with Sean O'Malley, right? They're
and Kyler Phillips.
Maybe there's something there. Like, yo, he beat your boy. I don't know, title shot. No, am I overthinking?
Wait, what is it again? Say that again.
Aldo's fighting Mario Batista, who trains with Sean O'Malley, and they're friends. I suppose they're cool.
Yeah,
they're teammates.
Oh, so Aldo beats him. I stand up for the gym. I got you.
I don't know. Maybe not.
Yeah, that one might be a stretch, pal. Oh, I don't know about that one. But here's a good one. Joseph Boza says, do they think Sean Strickland's the backup fighter for 305? I haven't heard that, and Sean has been pretty adamant that that's not going to happen. But because Whitaker was booked against Hamzat, who is the backup fighter at 305? Anyone know, or are we just winging it with the 2 Africans?
Probably just winging it. I don't know if Sean Strickland's flying 30 hours just to cut some weight and probably not fight. Doesn't really seem like his sort of thing. So, yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard anything. This seems like the situation like Jared Cannonier or something would show up randomly like the day before the fight, but who knows? I have no clue what it's going to be. Maybe they just let it ride and hope for the best here.
Do you know how much these guys are getting paid for cutting weight?
What's that?
Have we ever found out how much any of these guys are getting paid for being back?
They get their show money.
Negotiation, but I've heard like 100K.
Yeah. And then if they fight, it graduates to whatever their contract would be.
And all no one has, so...
Danny Dixon backed off. He says fair point, and he conceded. Colostrum says Bautista's a better fighter than Martinez. He will give Aldo a tough fight. I agree, man. I really like this Bautista kid.
Yeah, he's good.
All right, folks, listen, we're gonna bounce on out of here. On the way out, if you can give us a like. Let me just tell you what you just listened to. Mike Bond just celebrated 11 years with Junkie. Congrats to him. We're lucky to have him. Danny Segura is on his about to complete 15 years. Goes has got since 2011, so that's 13. That's almost 30 years. Just we're matching the UFC's talent. All right. So hit the like button on the way out. Hit the subscribe button. You get all this free content. And a big shout out to Kamikaze. He added another one to his nest. He had a baby boy. His wife had a baby boy today. His wife or his partner, I'm not sure, had a baby boy. And so congrats to him and his family. He's the one that comes up with those the cool graphic art for Spinning Back Clique. He's a huge part of our team. Him and Cole Coffee are the dynamic duo behind the scenes that actually make us all look good. So again, congratulations, Abby, to you and your family. And folks, we're out of here. Go out and be a champ. Oh, thank you, Brian John, for that super chat. We really appreciate it. He says, very good show. We really, really appreciate that. Very, very kind of you. And folks, we are out of here. Go out and be a champion. We'll talk to you soon.